Oh, it is now. I call this meeting to order, and if anyone has a declaration of pecuniary interest, they may do it now or at a later date, and we are going to proceed in camera. So I have moved by Councillor Vadimokar and seconded by Councillor Cummings that in accordance with the Town of Penetanguishene Procedural Bylaw 2017-86, the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene move into an in-camera session to discuss litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality or local board, including matters before administrative tribunals, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. All in favor? That is carried. And so we will proceed to the committee room. Okay, council, we will arise from closed session, and I have a motion from Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Vademonker that the council of the town of Penetanguishene rise from in-camera session with a report. All in favor? Carried. And we have a motion by Councillor Vademonker and seconded by Councillor Cummings that council directs staff to proceed as outlined in the staff report. All in favor? That's carried. And now we will proceed to our regular council meeting and call to order, and I ask council to rise when I read the council commitment.
Sorry, Your Worship. We just need to adjourn the special council meeting before we begin the next one.
Okay, so motion to adjourn, Councillor LaRose, and seconded Councillor Sinema.
Sorry, and we also have a section questions from media and the public before we adjourn.
Andrew? No? Is Elizabeth back there? No? Okay. Public? No? We adjourn. And now we can move on to our regular council meeting. So we will rise as I read the council commitment for the town. We are grateful for the many gifts which have been bestowed on Penetanguishene and its citizens, including the gifts of freedom, opportunity, and peace that we enjoy. May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. We ask that all in attendance and those who could not be here assist us in promoting good government. May our decisions as members of council be enlightened, and may we all be strengthened in our awareness of our duties and responsibilities. May we be granted the wisdom, knowledge, will, and understanding to preserve the good fortune of the town for the benefit of all and to make good laws and wise decisions. Thank you all for attending. Declaration of office. We have with us this evening Councillor Levy, who unfortunately was not able to be here because of illness at the inaugural, so we will have her take her oath of office with our clerk. Debbie.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're going to ask Councillor Levy to read out the declaration of office that was provided by all other members of council on December 5th, and we will sign such accordingly.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I, Debbie Levy, having been elected to the office of councillor in the town of Penetanguishene, do solemnly promise and declare that I will truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability. I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or any other improper manner. I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And I make this solemn promise and declare conscientiously believing it to be true and knowing that it is of the same force and effect as if made under oath. Thank you very much.
No. Councillor Levy, if you have a few words that you would like to address, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I would like to start out by thanking our former council. We had a great 4-year run and accomplished a lot. I'm very pleased with the term we just finished. I'd like to thank the current council. I'm really excited about the next 4 years. We have a great team. And, of course, all of the staff of Penetanguishene deserve a great deal of credit, and it's always a pleasure to work with them. I'd like to support people who have supported.
Certificates both from Jill Dunlop and Bruce Stanton that we received. I guess I flipped 2 and 3, didn't I? Their interests may so do, or at the appropriate time. And we now have adoption of minutes not already confirmed, and that the following minutes of council meetings be confirmed and adopted as circulated. Regular Council of November 20, Indigenous Community. All in favor? Carried. We now move on to the Advisory Committee and Board appointments. And I have moved by Councillor Vaudebacher.
Sorry, Your Worship. Sorry to interrupt. Just at that last item, I just didn't know if you wanted to give council an opportunity for discussion regarding the art, because this is the first time that it is appearing on an agenda. Normally, we would have this appear to a committee of the whole meeting. There would be discussion. Then it would go to council for consideration. But because I think there's short timing, I just didn't know if perhaps council would be you'd want to offer them the opportunity for discussion.
Well, yes, if there anyone has any opportunity for discussion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this project did come before council in the fall, and I do believe at the time the discussion was that it should be turned over to the new council for discussion. So that's why it's here this evening. And certainly our planner has gone to great lengths in putting together reports. It is a project that dollars were available, and $20,000 has been put aside to help with this project. We need to put a committee together if we hope to be able to get funding from other sources. So at this time, perhaps I would ask Andrea if she has anything that she would like to add.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to Deputy Mayor Dubo. I think you've done a great job summarizing the project itself. This was something that was brought back and is somewhat of a priority, given we have funding to spend until March 31st of 2020. So we have just a little over a year to spend the money, get the project off the ground, and select some art. So it was brought straight forward to council so we can at least start establishing the ad hoc committee. But there will be multiple times that this ad hoc committee will report back to committee of the whole on the status of the project and the path that's being recommended by the committee.
Very good. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one concern. We seem to have a focus group here. What happens if we don't get people from those various groups?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Cummings. It was strategically designed to have a variety of stakeholders on there. There could be the potential that we won't get suitable candidates in each of those categories, and should that happen, then the follow-up report to appoint the steering committee members will address that, should it occur.
Further questions? Okay, there being none, then it is all in favor and carried. Okay, we now will move on to B, and that is Advisory Committee and Board appointments. And I have a move by Councillor Vaudebacher, seconded by Councillor Cummings, that the Council of the Town of Penetanguishene ratify the council member appointments to the town section committees as presented by the Mayor. On the Economic Development Corporation of North Simcoe, Councillor Debbie Levy. To the Penetanguishene Police Services Board, Councillor Michelle Mayotte and Councillor Brian Cummings. To the Huronia Airport Commission, Councillor Dan LaRose. To the Severn Sound Environmental Association, Deputy Mayor Anita Dubo. Penetanguishene Public Library Board, Councillor Jill Saint-Amand and Councillor George Vaudebacher. And the Curling Club Board, Councillor Brian Cummings. All in favor? That is carried. We now move on to
Your Worship, if I might, if you don't mind, if I just want to add, for the sake of council as well as the public on appointments to committees, what we've presented this evening and council has ratified are the boards and committees that are essentially external in nature. Staff will be presenting a report on the advisory committees to council in the new year, and looking for council to ratify some potential minor changes to our committee structure, our advisory committee structure, based on the recommendation in the service delivery review. Once that occurs, we will need to give notice and amend our procedure bylaw. Following that, then we will be looking to bring through His Worship the appointments to the final advisory committees that council essentially lands on. So I just wanted to provide that context and timeline for the sake of the public as well as council.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. We will now, yes, Councilor Rose.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder, have we notified any of the people that are sitting on the boards that may meet between now and January to, I'm just saying for an example, at the airport, we'll have a meeting probably on the 14th, 15th of January. Do we carry on with our town rep that exists now, or has any communication been made to them?
Well, now that's a good question, because we do have a town rep on the Huroney Airport Commission. Mr. CAO?
Through Your Worship, now that council has essentially passed our new reps for those external boards, we will communicate with those various boards and committees and advise them of who the new rep is. And once they've set their meeting schedule, be it the Airport Commission or be it the Curling Club Board or be it EDCNS, etc., then the members appointed can continue in some cases, or in other cases begin their duties on those committees or boards.
Okay. You're good? Okay. Okay, we now move on to the consent agenda, which is none. Motions of which notice has been previously given, there's none. Notices of motion, there are none. Consideration of bylaws, there are none. Question period from media and public. Oh. Announcement and inquiries. Any announcements or inquiries? There are none, so then we will go on to the confirmation bylaw, and it is moved by Councillor Cummings and seconded by Councillor Vadeboncoeur that confirmation bylaw 2018-81 be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All in favor? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Mayat, seconded. Councillor Sainamont. All in favor? Okay, Council, we will now move on to our Committee of the Whole and call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda, Committee of the Whole agenda, December 12, 2018. It is recommended action that the Committee of the Whole agenda for December 12, 2018 be approved as presented. Mover, Councilor LaRose, seconded, Deputy Mayor, all in favor. Declaration of pecuniary interests, we may so do now or at the appropriate time. Number 5 is the Council Information Package, A, December 5, 2018, and that the recommended action that the following Council Information Package, having been given due consideration, be received for information. Are there any questions or concerns? None? Then all in favor? Okay. We now move on to 6, Section A, Transportation and Environmental Services, and I will turn it over to Councillor Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Consent on the agenda, we have nothing. 6B, matter for consideration. I guess we'll have a verbal update on the Main Street reconstruction. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As of the last update received from our engineering consultant, Greenland Engineering, our contractor, JB Enterprises, has finished the majority of the restoration work on the Main Street that can be done within the winter season. The remainder, resurfacing or the restoration work in the boulevard areas, some of it will have to wait until the spring, being some of the interlocking pavers in and around the intersection of Points and Main due to the construction that's ongoing there. And the line painting, or the temporary line painting, has been completed for the main street. That being completed last week. This is temporary line painting, so it'll be the permanent type installed when weather and temperatures permit in the spring. But in the meantime, our contractor has placed temporary lines down for safety during the winter season, with the permanent markings being done in the spring.
Thank you, Brian. Does anybody have any questions or something? Councillor LaRose?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, I was just wondering, we had discussed before about putting some overhead signs up with the road names, and especially for the turning lanes when you're heading north. Do we have an update on that?
Certainly, through to Councillor LaRose, we are still anticipating to do that sign installation as indicated last update, to put the directional arrows as were in place before the construction, for sure. Yep.
Do we have any more questions for Manager of Transportation? No? Okay, continue with item B2, award to the engineering design, construction, and installation of the 60-foot by 100-foot salt dome cover. Recommended action that the bid be submitted by Brightspan Building System of Ontario for $100,090.19, HST and HST rebate included, to be approved for the engineer, construction, and installation of the new cover for the salt storage facility, and that the recommendation, the additional fund be required for the completion of the project, estimated at $100,647.81, be allocated from the Development Charge Reserve Fund. I guess everybody's got the report in front of them. They looked at it. It's pretty basic, just awarded the tenders to this contractor, but if anybody has any question or anything, I think Brian's got all the documents in front of him, so if we have any questions? Madam Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. The $100,000, that's an overage. The whole $100,000 is overage. What was the total, excuse me, what was the total amount budgeted, Brian?
We had a budget of about $283,000 for the construction and remaining design for the salt dome cover.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Manager of Transportation? Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, do we have, can you just give me an update on the existing dome?
Through to Councillor Cummings, referring to the sand dome?
Yeah.
The sand dome is designated for sand storage only, and this will be dedicated storage for the salt that we use on our roads during the winter season. Right now, or in the past, we've used an uncovered storage shed that doesn't allow us to store any type of quantity throughout the winter season, so we're dependent on truckloads coming through the winter season.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions for Manager of Transportation? Okay, I guess we have to have a mover for this. Mover by Councillor Levy, a seconder, Councillor LaRose. All in favor? Any opposed? Pass. Thank you. Now for item C, referral of upcoming agenda and staff. Referral that the Transportation Environment Service section endorse the following additional existing referral for upcoming agenda and staff. Do we have anything we want to add to the future agenda? I guess we're going to keep the Thompson Road on the agenda for 2019. Can I have a mover by Councillor Rose, a seconder? Councillor Debbie Levy. All in favor for the future agenda items? Opposed? Passed. Question period from the media or the public? Elizabeth? Okay, thank you. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Mayette. And we will now move on to the section of Recreation and Community Services, and I pass it on to Councillor LaRose.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under 7A, we have our consent agenda. We have two items, the Museum Advisory Committee from September the 27th and the Penetanguishene Public Library Board minutes dated October 29th. If we could have a mover and a seconder for that. We have a mover, Your Worship, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? That's carried. 7B, matters for consideration. Look at that, we have a week with nothing. Excellent. C, we are down to referrals to upcoming agendas. We have the cycling strategy. We were asking staff to look to outsource recreation programs to a third party, and our building assessment coming up. So if anybody has anything to add or want to take anything out. Seeing none, we'll go to question period from the public and media. Seeing none, back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. We will now move on to Planning and Community Development Services, and I pass it on to Deputy Mayor Dubo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under consent agenda, we have the minutes from the Committee of Adjustment dated October 29th, Downtown Improvement Committee meetings dated October 3rd, and Sustainable Severn Sound Committee minutes of July, August, and September. Are there any questions or issues with any of those? I would ask for a mover. Moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor Cummings. All those in favor? Carried. Our matter for consideration is the proposal of our zoning bylaw review project, the establishment of a steering committee, that a zoning bylaw review steering committee be established for the purpose of guiding the project, consisting of the chair and vice chair of planning and development sections, the chief administrative officer, the director of planning and community development, and 3 resident appointees to be made, and that staff be directed to advertise a call for participation on the zoning bylaw review committee. This follows our official plan that we hope will be sanctioned by the County of Simcoe very soon. So, Andrea, if you would like to speak to this.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So this is very similar to an earlier topic on the agenda. It is establishing an ad hoc committee, a steering committee to help guide the whole zoning bylaw review project. So we have submitted the terms of reference and request for proposals for a consultant to prepare the project. It was a 2018 capital budget where we had $75,000 set aside to do this and complete this project. Given some delays in the official plan, it was delayed a little bit, but we're hoping to pick it up again in early 2019. And so really the purpose of this is to obtain council direction and permission to establish that steering committee and go to the public and advertise for participation on it.
Thank you, Andrea. Is there further comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Levy.
There. Just as far as the size of the steering committee, through to Andrea, when we had our last steering committee, we only had 1 resident, and that was a good-sized team with the staff and the councillors. Is there a particular reason why you chose 3?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Levy. No real specific reason. This is really where we get into what I would call the details of performance standards and regulations with land use. So it's has a lot more impact on everyday person's lives and their properties. And so trying to obtain a lot of feedback and participation from the public, I think, is extremely important, and as important in this project as with the official plan. But because the details can get very, very specific, I was hoping to see some resident participation from an array of backgrounds and expertise. And so that's why I was hoping for a little bit more than 1 public member to participate on the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to compliment the staff in the section for bringing this forward. I thought it was an excellent idea, a nice way to involve the public at a technical level in the development of the new zoning bylaw. So I just wanted to say that when I read it, I thought it was just a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder on this, Stacy? And I do not. So would someone move this project forward? Councillor Mayotte, seconded by Councillor Klug. All those in favor? Carried. Where am I? Referrals to upcoming agendas. We have two items. Retail sale of cannabis, public consultation. I understand that there is a survey that is available, and it's on our website, and certainly encourage everyone to get on that website and give us your opinions so that we will have that information to work with. And the retail sale of cannabis, the options that will be coming to council very soon. Is there anything to add? Yes, Madam.
Just further to the cannabis survey, it is on our website, or not on our website, there is a link to it. It is a survey document on another website, but those are being provided in paper copies too for those who are uncomfortable with computers. The paper copies are provided here at Town Hall as well as our library.
Thank you. Questions? I think Councillor LaRose.
Thank you. I was just wondering, do we know when this is coming back? I believe the opt-in, opt-out date is sometime in January.
January.
So
Yes.
when you start thinking if we only have another week or two and then a couple quick ones in January, it would be nice if we could wrap up those surveys and have the staff report a little bit in advance.
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Chair, the survey closes the end of this month. There will be a report coming to Council on January the 9th, as the date to opt in or opt out is January 22nd, the day before our second regular meeting in January. Should Council wish to have an additional opportunity, certainly at the call of the Chair, there could be a special meeting called between the 9th of January and January 22nd. Unfortunately, we were left with this timing predicament through the province, and we've, at a staff level, and certainly through a prior council, have tried to make the best of it in terms of getting all the information in front of council, with, as Councillor LaRose speaks to, with a little bit of advance time to review and make a decision.
Thank you, Mr. CAO, and I know that there's a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes. Staff has been very busy talking to authorities, health board, police, and compiling information that will be available to us soon. There's no further discussion. I'd ask for a mover for the items. Councillor LaRose, seconded by Councillor Sanama. All those in favor? Carried. And I will throw it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We will now go to Section Finance and Corporate Services, and I turn it over to Councillor Boisdeboncoeur.
Thank you, Worship. There are 3 items under the consent agenda this evening, and they're being received for information. The first one is a déclaration pour la protection des droits des francophones dans les municipalités canadiennes, and it's a declaration for the protection of rights of francophones in Canadian municipalities. The second item is the development charge indexing report, and basically it's a report that outlines under the town's development charge bylaw that the development charge rates are indexed on an annual basis based on the third quarter StatsCan construction price index. And that results for this year of a development charge increase of 5.2%, and that will be effective February 1st, 2019. The third item is the correspondence from the Severn Sound Environmental Association with respect to Board of Directors appointments. Are there any questions on any of those items? Seeing none, we'll move to the next, and these are items for consideration by council. And
Sorry to interrupt. We just need a mover and seconder to receive those consent items.
Pardon me?
Thank you.
So, Yes, so I'll look for a mover and a seconder. So we have moved by Councillor Levy and seconded by Councillor LaRose that the consent agenda items be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. So moving to the matters for consideration, the first item is to provide for an interim tax levy, and the recommendation is that staff be directed to provide for an interim tax levy. This is a tax levy that covers the municipality until the budget is approved, and it covers the first two payments on the tax levy, and then before the final tax levy is approved sometime in the spring. So it's a basic item, a standard item that comes before council on an annual basis. Are there any questions on that item? So I'd like a mover, if I may, and a seconder. Mover by Councillor Mayotte and a seconder, Councillor LaRose. And that staff be directed to provide an interim tax levy and the necessary bylaw be presented to council for approval. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you. The next item is another standard item, and that is brought forward on an annual basis, and it's a bylaw to authorize the temporary borrowing of funds to meet the current expenditures 2019 until the taxes are collected. And the recommendation is that the mayor and treasurer are authorized to borrow funds if required to meet current expenditures until 2019 taxes are collected, and the necessary bylaw be presented for council approval. Any questions on that item? May I have a mover and a seconder for that? So Councillor Sanama moves it, a seconder. Councillor Cummings, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you. And the last item is the budget draft number 3, and this is the third draft of the proposed 2019 budget. And documents are in your agenda package. Perhaps I'll just ask the treasurer at this point just to go over the highlights. I believe that if there have been any changes, they've been fairly minor changes, housekeeping if any, and I'll just ask her to go over her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this is our 2019 budget draft number 3. I will present the highlights of my report, which I have, as Councillor Vedaboncourt stated, that there are minor changes. And from the last version of draft 2 that was presented to Committee of the Whole, I've highlighted my updates in yellow in the report. So our three-year operating budget summary is included and has not had any changes to that report. The tax impact is still at 2.25%, which is what staff had agreed to bring forward during our draft number 1 budget back in June when council directed staff when the municipal price index was presented. So we do today still remain at the 2.25% for the town's 2019 operating budget. There is a slight OPP tax rate impact of 0.16%, and the total increase for the town's operating budget is $225,545. The capital budgets for 2019 and 2020 both still remain, as in the other drafts, at our capital base budget of $1.15 million. There were some slight changes to draft number 3. I can find them. The 2019 capital budget for planning and development, there was a secondary town plan. secondary plan for the town dock that was amended, and it was reduced, it's an $80,000 project, and the taxation portion was reduced by half, and a subsidy was inserted for the other half. That resulted in $40,000 worth of taxation that we allocated elsewhere in the 2019 capital budget. So there was a public works vehicle replacement that we increased the tax-supported funds towards that, as well as there was a recreation and community services capital project that we allocated the balance to. And I'll look to Sherry just to recall what project that was. It was our taxation contribution to McGuire Playground project. So those are the only capital budget changes that occurred since draft number 2. Updated capital justification sheets related to those 3 capital projects were provided in your agenda package as well. There was another update added to the report under the additional budget requests. So there were, previously in draft 1, there was an additional budget request related to staffing increase for the library that was on draft number 1, council consideration. And there's an update that's been added since then, since draft number 2. For winter maintenance of the Peel Street sidewalk from Robert Street West to Simcoe Street, to host a summer event to celebrate our new Main Street. We are recommending that in our draft 3 operating budget yet is $10,000. In addition to the original 2 requests that were provided in draft 1, an additional $32,130. And that is a potential tax impact in total of about 0.4% on the current 2.25% that we're looking at. So those are the updates in terms of minor changes or new items being presented to committee for consideration. I also just wanted to provide a brief update related to our returned assessment roll and the current value assessment growth estimate that we always include when we start this budget process. We have, as recent as last week, we just received our 2019 returned roll from MPAC. So we were able to do some analysis on the returned roll and how the current budget would impact our tax rates. And based on the 2019 assessment roll, as well as the actual growth that we have seen over last year, the current budget where it stands today, and the OPP increase would see the town tax rate at 2.25%, and because of the growth and the new OPP billing model that we have, there would be a reduction to the OPP tax rate. So the overall net impact would be 0.95% or $13.61 per $100,000 of CVA. So basically, without taking into consideration what is going to happen with the county tax rate and the province's education tax rate, because we won't know that until March sometime, the estimated CVA growth in our budget currently is very low compared to what has actually occurred in the last year. And I think the Director of Planning has stated that we've had a very busy year in building permits. So we've seen that growth come in through the assessment roll. If council were to approve the 2.25% tax rate as it stands right now, we could be looking at additional funds from that growth that we could invest into reserves for asset management, snow removal, increasing service levels, in relation to one of the new items that I mentioned just previously, as well as taking that growth, a portion of that growth that we are seeing, and I would recommend that some of it be put into a tax stabilization reserve, because every year when we do guess or estimate what the CVA growth may or may not be, if it were to come in less than what we anticipated, we would have a reserve that we could stabilize that budget estimate when the return roll came in. Are there any questions or comments related to the draft number 3 budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not so much a question to you, Carrie. That was all very good. It's all very well. I think we're all okay. But to my recollection, at previous council, we kind of were okay with the operating budget, but I was under the impression that we were told a request from Councillor Levy that we were going to do a capital look at all the capital projects that were going to come before this round was approved. And I don't believe that we ever got around to it, and obviously this council being here tonight for their first night did not get a shot at that. So I'm just wondering if it's either prudent for us to do that right now, or would you rather see us come back at a little later date? I don't think there's an urgency to get this done today or tomorrow, so I just want to make sure that we have a crack at it, because I know that we didn't.
So just before I go to Councillor Levy, I'll just, I think Councillor Rose is posing the question to the group whether there's interest in seeing the capital, the 2-year capital, 2019-2020 budget either reviewed in detail tonight or brought back at some future point to give council or committee an opportunity to go through the various capital projects. So, Worship, I'll defer to you.
Actually, Mr. Chair, the CAO and I had an actual discussion on this this afternoon, and there were some thoughts that if there was any further discussion that had to be had vis-a-vis the budget, that perhaps we could look at an early time date, a special meeting dealing strictly with budget in early January.
Okay. Thank you, Worship, and I'll go to Councillor Levy.
Yes, thank you. What I had requested was a separate meeting just for the capital projects, because we really went through operating. So much of operating is mandated, but we never once discussed capital. I made my views known on a few items in planning that I thought could be removed and gave my reasons then. Won't get into it now. I'd like to see a dedicated meeting early January. Unfortunately, I'll be on holidays, so I'll put mine in writing.
So just, I'll ask if the CAO has any comments at this point.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. Certainly a dedicated meeting, if that's the will of council, that's certainly something that we can coordinate and arrange. I think at a staff level, that wasn't something that we perhaps clearly understood, that we wanted a separate meeting for operational and capital, but certainly something that is more than feasible and more than doable. We can, at a staff level, look at some dates and send out some options to council in terms of what might work best, and map it out in terms of when that fits with other committee and council meetings, ultimately looking at potential ratification by council in late January or possibly February.
Thank you. So we'll look at the motion and see what amendments we might need to the motion to affect that. So basically, as I understand, there seems to be interest in moving the capital portion of the budget to a separate discussion in the new year, and that would be the only part of the budget that would be part of that discussion. So we'll look to the clerk to see if she can come up with some wording with that. In the interim, if I hear members of council or those that spoke, perhaps we can get some consensus on the operating budget. If members of council are satisfied with the operating budget, maybe we can deal with that as move it forward as an approved in principle item, subject to the more detailed review of the capital items. But before we do that, we do have proposals for amendments to the operating budget that were outlined by the treasurer on page 146 of your package, and that is the request from the library and the request from the Severn Sound Environmental Association, and then the three other items that were added as of this meeting this evening, or proposed to be added, that add 0.4% to the operating budget. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to any one of those items that are proposed, or not proposed, but just additional requests to the operating budget? Yes, Councillor Rose.
I didn't think we were dealing with it tonight. I would have rather dealt with it all at a special budget night when we're all into budget, but if you want to do it now, I do have some questions about the funding of the library, the extra $10,000, $12,000, whatever it was, to fund the library at Georgian Village. To my recollection, it was never even voted on by council when it originally started over a year ago. I looked through the minutes. I could never find anything that ever approved us to ever be doing it, and I wonder why in such a location that the taxpayers would be footing the bill for a private library in a building that is not ours. So I would just like to see some more justification as to, why we're doing it. And, to me it was to make sure that the residents there could get to a library, and part of the reasoning for putting in the bus system was to incorporate that. So now we're paying for a bus that picks them up there and takes them to our library, and we're kicking in a bunch of money to the county just to have a separate library there that nobody else can really access. So not too happy about it.
So, Councillor Rose, thank you very much for your question. I don't know if there's anyone prepared tonight to answer that, or it's something that could be brought back with a full report for a future meeting. I thought that there might have been some interest in moving the operating budget forward this evening.
If that's part of the operating budget, then I wouldn't be interested in moving it forward this evening. If it's going to be part of, we could do it the same night we do the capital program is fine.
Thank you, Worship. I believe you have a question or a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I actually have a comment. Is that the John Brown Library at the village is maintained and operated by our library, and it's staffed by our library, and it has grown somewhat, and it is still part of a taxation system because the people who use it are certainly taxpayers at one point in time or another, and the growth that has taken place, it is more time being spent to operate this library, and I, for one, having sat on the library board, know the need for the additional staff. So I would certainly move that we move forward with it.
Thank you, Worship. Any other comments on that, Madam Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that the library at Georgian Village is accessible to all residents of Penetanguishene, and there are people that are using that library. It has grown, Your Worship. I agree with your statement. So certainly I think it's been a great service that we've provided not only to those residents, because there are our residents. It's not just long-term. It is the garden homes, the apartments. There are 300-plus people that live in that facility, and they are using the library. Thank you.
Councillor Rose, I see the CAO's hand up there. Would you like to defer to him, or would you? Okay. Councillor Rose, please go ahead.
The only reason I say that is of a town with a population of 10,000 to have 2 libraries is nobody has a town of 10,000 that has a library and a satellite system. That's just a way too upgraded program for our town. You can't have 2 6 blocks apart. That's outrageous.
Thank you, Councillor, and I think I'll defer now to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, I assume what we're talking about is the 24,500 number. I think there was a number of 10 or 12,000 thrown out at the start of this conversation, but I think the number we're referring to is 24,500 as the additional budget request that has not been included in the draft budget. There is an explanation in the budget binder that talks about all the rationale and the reasoning around meeting the current demands of children and our seniors, as well as supporting the respect and recognition policy that the library will be working towards. But at the end of the day, I don't think the treasurer or myself are experts in this area. If it's something the committee is willing to entertain and have a conversation about tonight, we do have our library CEO in the audience, and through you, Mr. Chair, just like any manager or senior manager here this evening, I think it would probably be appropriate that she be able to speak if it's something that committee wants to entertain this evening. If it's not and you want to entertain it at a future meeting, then certainly that could be discussed at that point. But I just want to point out that our library CEO is in the audience and probably is the best one to speak to that.
Thank you, CAO Lees. So, not to put you on the spot, but is this something that you'd be prepared to speak to this evening, or would you like the opportunity to prepare a report and bring something back at a future meeting? Perhaps you could find a microphone to be able to speak to committee.
It's on, yeah, okay. To Councillor LaRose's point that it's an expense that a town of this population doesn't really warrant. We pay nothing for that facility. We pay nothing to be there. The county provides the collections that are in that library, and the county also subsidizes the staff that are up there to a degree. So really the impact financially to the town for that second branch is very minimal. It is a well-used facility, and it's available to every taxpayer resident in this municipality, and not just those living at Georgian Village right now. So I want you to make sure you're aware of that. The request for increase in staffing is to help with the programs that we offer at the library, whether we offer them at the main branch, at Georgian Village, at the park, anywhere else in town. We have to staff programming, and that's mainly what the request is for, staffing, to do those things and to provide additional services. Our programs, attendance is going through the roof, and we're having a hard time meeting the requests and the needs from the public. So that's really what that request is all about.
Thank you very much. So, I don't know, Councillor Rose, if you had any questions at this point. There may be interest in dealing with these proposed additional requests together with the capital budget, so that we can consider them fully as the capital budget. So, if I can see some nods of heads, if that's of interest, that these additional items that are being requested be considered as part of that discussion on the capital. I see some nods. So. Madam Clerk, if we could consider that as a amendment to the motion there as well.
Absolutely. I have a proposed amendment created, but I maybe just need to capture, is it specific operating items that want, or are we just going to really speak about operating and capital?
Madam Clerk, my understanding is that committee wishes to speak about the capital budget, the 2019 and 2020 capital budget, and they wish to speak about the additional budget requests pertaining to the operating budget only. Those are the two items. Thank you.
So the motion I have is that the 2019 budget draft number 3 and related budget documents be received for information and discussion, and that staff amend the operating budget as directed. I don't believe that any direction was received today, so that can be removed. And finally, that staff be directed to schedule a special meeting of committee to review in detail the proposed additional operating as well as the capital budget for 2019 and 2020.
Thank you. Just if the proposed budget, additional budget requests, did you have requests in there? I didn't hear that.
No, I didn't. So, and finally, that staff be directed to schedule a special meeting of committee to review in detail the proposed additional operating requests as well as the capital budget for 2019 and 2020.
Thank you. That sounds good. So, with that motion, is there any further discussion? May I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Rose, a seconder. Councillor Levy, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So moving on to the items for referrals to upcoming agenda and staff. We have a number of items. The Huronia Airport Commission Joint Business Operational Review, and Councillor Rose had raised that. We have Election 2018 report on items as required regarding the 2018 municipal election. Joint insurance renewal strategy and a towing contract. So are there any additional items for consideration? And our treasurer, saw your hand there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification and a minor amendment based on a motion made by Council in November under the key deliverables for the joint insurance renewal strategy. If the word RFP could just be replaced with renewal. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Deputy Mayor, you had a question or comment?
I wanted to ask about the towing contract. I thought that this issue was brought forward at Police Service Board, and I thought there was supposed to be some correspondence that come forward. I'd have to look back on the minutes, so maybe tonight's not the night, but that is questionable because it was discussed at the board and we felt that we really didn't want to get into it, and I thought that was the recommendation that was supposed to come from Police Service.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the chair, yes, I think this was discussed in the Police Services Board when the initial question about the tow contract was being questioned, and I think there was a brief discussion, and then it was brought up at a council meeting, and it was added to this specifically for us to bring forward other options. I don't think that there's any, it's not about amending the current tow contract, but it's about potential other options that we could proceed with in future engagement with tow operators. But again, this is a perfect opportunity, like we discussed in orientation, if this council around this table decides that this is not something these 9 people want us to be working on, it can be removed through a motion. If it is something that you want to remain, it can remain.
I would suggest at this time that we remove it because it was discussed in length, and our police service, our OPP, did very recently have a meeting with all the towing contractors within the area, and they have it all set up, and I personally don't think that we need to dive into this. It's being taken care of by those that should be taking care of it. Anyway, If you want a motion, if I had a seconder, I certainly would bring that forward.
I believe Councillor
Second
Levy
my
is
motion.
seconding that motion. Any discussion on that? Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. Police services, our police contracts all have their own towing services. What about our bylaw when they have a tow? Are we doing that a joint fare?
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Yes, so this contract actually does direct the OPP on who they call unless someone, so if there's an accident, the OPP are directed to call the person that we've appointed, as well as our bylaw officer or any of our snowplow operators that are responsible for calling a tow truck would be calling this company based on the appointment that we've given them.
So if we take this off the table, then we just agree to do whatever the OPP are doing then?
No, in actual fact, it would be that we as the town appointed them through a process. The question was, should we be appointing them through the process that we undertook? That was discussed at Police Services Board, and it was decided that there needed to be a little more than just a discussion, maybe a report on options on how to appoint this, whether it be through the OPP or whether it be done by us as town staff, and that was the proposed details of that report.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a mover and seconder on the removal of the item dealing with the towing contract, but before we vote on that, if I may just ask a question of the clerk with respect to the item about the 2018 election, does that still needed to be on that list as well?
It could certainly be removed. It's something that's going to be arriving on your desks, whether it's on that list or not. We do have several follow-up reports about the 2018 election, accessibility, all of the numbers related to who voted online and who you voted by telephone. There's a lot of reports coming, but it certainly doesn't need to be there for me to bring them forward.
Okay, I understand that based on the reports that are coming forward, I think we'll leave it on. So we'll just deal with the towing contract. So we have a motion duly moved and seconded to remove the item towing contract from the future agenda items. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And before I turn it back to His Worship, are there any questions from the media and the public? Seeing none, Your Worship, I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Vadimokar. Before I adjourn, I might ask Cindy to just give us a little synopsis of that nice little piece of information that you put forward to us today, to the board members. Yes, sure.
This morning, the library had one of our longtime residents come to the library for the specific purpose to come and see the beautiful Christmas decorations that we have throughout the library, which we have every year and have had ever since Pat Musquette has been the chair of our Friends. And I had to put out that little plug for Pat because she worked so hard at this. After touring the library in all its splendor, she came into my office and handed me a donation of $5,000. So her comment was, this is such a lovely place and such a joyful place. Everyone should appreciate it and everyone should enjoy it. And if I can do anything to help, this is my way of doing it. And I want you to know that that is echoed many, many times over throughout December when people come into the library. So, thank you.
And I can echo the sentiment that if anyone hasn't gone to the library, it is absolutely marvelous. That's yeah. Okay, and with that, move to adjourn. Councillor Cummings and Councillor Maya. We are adjourned.